You have spent so much of your life trying to be acceptable that you no longer know who you are when nobody is watching. Think about that for a moment. Every morning, you wake up and before you've said a single word, before you've had a single thought that truly belongs to you, you've already begun calculating. How you look, how you'll be perceived, what they'll think, what they'll say, what they'll remember. You weren't born doing this, you were trained. And the most devastating part, you never noticed it happening. Carl Jung said something that most people read and immediately forget because it's too uncomfortable to hold on to. He said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." But it goes further than that, far further, because it isn't just your parents' unlived life you're carrying. It's your teacher's expectations, your culture's definition of success, your friends' quiet judgments, the version of you that got applause once and then spent the next 20 years trying to resurrect that moment. You are not living your life. You are managing other people's impressions of it, and you have become so skilled at this, so dangerously efficient, that you've forgotten what you actually want, not what sounds good when you say it out loud, not what makes people nod, what you actually want in the silence when no one is watching. Do you even know anymore? Here's what this looks like in real life, and you'll recognize it immediately. You scroll through someone else's progress and feel something you don't want to name. You call it motivation. But it's closer to shame, a quiet, persistent voice that says, "Why aren't you further along?" You change your plans based on what you think other people will respect, not what excites you, what will land well. You shrink in rooms where someone seems more confident, not because you're weak, but because somewhere, a long time ago, you learned that taking up space invites criticism, and criticism felt like abandonment. So you made yourself smaller, safer, palatable, and you told yourself that was wisdom. It wasn't wisdom. It was survival dressed up as a personality. Jung called the hidden part of you the shadow, not your darkness in the dramatic sense, not your worst impulses or your most shameful moments, but everything you buried to become acceptable, every emotion you swallowed to keep the peace, every desire you dismissed as selfish, every version of yourself that made someone uncomfortable, so you killed it quietly, politely, and moved on. The shadow doesn't disappear when you bury it. It governs. It shows up as irrational anger at people who seem free. It shows up as sabotage right before something good happens, because part of you doesn't believe you're allowed to have it. It shows up as exhaustion with no medical explanation, as disconnection, as the feeling of watching your own life from slightly outside your body. That isn't anxiety. That's estrangement from yourself. You've been so focused on being understood by others that you've stopped understanding yourself. But here's where it gets dangerous. The problem isn't that you care what people think. That's human. Deeply, irreducibly human. The problem is that you have outsourced the construction of your identity to the reactions of people who are doing the exact same thing to you. Everyone performing, everyone watching, no one actually present. You are living inside a mirror maze, mistaking reflections for reality. Nietzsche understood this. He watched people chase validation the way they once chased God, with the same desperation, the same surrender of self. He called it the herd. Not as an insult, as a description of a psychological condition. The condition of defining yourself through belonging rather than through becoming. And becoming, real becoming, requires a specific kind of violence, not against others, against the version of yourself that was built to please them. Imagine a man, intelligent, capable. Everyone who knows him agrees. This person has something rare, but he has spent 40 years waiting for permission, waiting for the right moment, for someone to recognize him, for circumstances to align, for the fear to pass, for confidence to arrive like a guest he could finally welcome. He is still waiting, not because he lacks talent, not because the world was unfair, though sometimes it was, but because he confused watching others with knowing himself. He studied the room so carefully that he forgot to study his own interior. He mastered the performance and lost the performer. He is not an unusual man. He is almost everyone. Jung's entire life's work pointed toward one direction, inward. Not as escapism, not as navel-gazing, as the most radical act available to a human being. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, underneath the roles, underneath the conditioning, underneath the accumulated armor of a lifetime spent adapting. And this process is not comfortable. It is not a wellness retreat. It is not something you can buy or optimize. It requires you to sit with the parts of yourself you have been avoiding, the grief you intellectualized, the anger you rebranded as boundaries, the longing you dismissed as unrealistic, the gifts you downplayed so others wouldn't feel threatened. Focusing on yourself is not narcissism. It is the prerequisite for everything real. You cannot give what you've never located inside yourself. You cannot love freely from a place of constant self-betrayal. You cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of performance. The most selfless thing you will ever do is become genuinely yourself. Because the world does not need another version of what already exists. It needs the unrepeatable, irreducible, specific thing that you are when you stop editing yourself for an audience. So let's be direct. Every time you refresh someone's page to see how they're doing, you are abandoning yourself. Every time you change your answer based on who's in the room, you are erasing yourself. Every time you feel pride only after someone else confirms your worth, you are handing the keys of your own life to a stranger. This is not discipline you lack. This is not confidence you need to manufacture. This is a relationship with yourself that you have never been taught to build, because the world has a vested interest in keeping you outward-facing. Outward-facing people are easier to sell to, easier to manage, easier to keep in line. The most rebellious thing you can do, the thing that costs something, is to turn inward, to decide that the primary work of your life is not to be understood, but to understand, not to be seen, but to see clearly, not to be loved first, to become someone you do not need to escape. You will not find yourself in how people respond to you. You will not find yourself in achievements that finally silence the doubt, because they never do. You will not find yourself in the version of you that has been sculpted by fear, comparison, and the exhausting labor of managing perception. You will find yourself in the quiet, in the discomfort of sitting with who you actually are when no one is watching, in the choice to stop performing and start listening to the part of you that has been trying to speak for years beneath all the noise. Jung spent his life mapping the interior of the human soul, and what he found at the end of every long descent into the deep was not darkness. It was the self, waiting, intact, patient in a way that should humble you. It did not leave when you abandoned it. It is still there. The question is no longer whether you have the strength to look inward. The question is, how much longer are you willing to wait? If this found something in you, subscribe. There's more where that came from.